Okay, so today we're looking at the additional maths paper 2019, just at question 1, because it's around about 12 marks and I want to go into a little bit of detail with it. So I'll be answering the question and I will also be then showing you the mark scheme so you can see where the marks come from. So if you look at the first question, you've got 27x squared plus 6x minus 5. So this is a quadratic, but it's also got a coefficient in front of x squared. So you need to use that method where you do 27 times minus 5, and that's going to get you the total multiplier by here. So that will give us 135, but it's obviously negative. I don't tend to worry too much about that at this stage, but I am going to be using it in a second. With the number 27, because it's quite hard when you're looking at 135 of factors, just remember that tree that it came from, 9 and 3, and it came 3 and 3. So we can use these products of primes to help us multiply. So I'm going to use 9 on this side, and then I'm going to have to times that number by 3, so it's going to be 15. Now, because it was negative 135 and not positive, I know one of these values, 9 or 15, is going to be negative. Because I want to get 6x, I'm going to be minusing that 9, because that will give us a strong positive number then. We then write long version out, so 27x squared minus 9x plus 15x, and then minus 5. And I tend to draw a little dotted line down the middle so I know I'm factorising each side separately. They've both got 9 in common here, so, and the x, can't forget about that. Let's remove that bit there. Perfect. So 9x, and then inside the bracket, we're going to have 3x, and then minus 1. So that one's done. Now, nice fact about this is this inside bracket should be the same by here. So I'm just going to write it straight away because it will be the same. Now, 15 to get to 3, well, I'm taking out 5, and that's it there. So we're going to say it's plus 5. This point is really important that you've got your 2 brackets. You haven't finished the question at this point. I've seen it in the past where people leave it like that and they're like, I'm done, I'm so finished. But it's that last step. So that one bracket is 9x plus 5. And the last step then is 3x minus 1. Now, if you have time later on in your paper, go to the back and just quickly expand that and make sure that you do get that original answer. You should be happy there. But there is plenty of checkpoints with your factorising at this point. You should see the fact that they are the same. Second section is hence solve the equation. So because it's worth 2 marks, I tend to equal each bracket to 0 and show the examiner. I don't just tell them what the answer is going to be, because I want to make sure I'm getting every single mark here. So I show this, and then that's going to give me negative 5 is 9x, and which means we know x is minus 5 over 9. Same here. 3x minus 1 equals 0, so I know 3x is 1, so x is a third, which you can do using the method just by visually, but it's good just to double check. Okay, so as we go for the mark scheme, so the first one, you got 2 marks for this question. Okay, so it was looking for 1 mark if you had done the correct factorisation, but you hadn't then put in your correct sums. That only gave you 1 mark. And then your second mark was sight of both of those then. So you needed both those brackets, again, next to each other. The last question, okay, so it was looking for minus 5/9 and a third. So that was enough to give you 2 marks. And again, that's it. So as long as they're happy with that, you didn't have to use quadratic formula or anything like that. You're just using your sum from above. Okay, so now we're on to part B. So there's 4 more marks to get on this section. It says express x squared plus 10x plus 35 in the form of, well, you're completing the square. So whenever you're completing the square, you're halving this, and then you're squaring that number but subtracting it, okay? So straight away, x plus 5, and we're going to be taking away the square of the 5. So taking away 5 squared plus 35. And again, I'm showing the examiner what I've done there. So that gives us x plus 5 minus 25 plus 35. Again, I'm showing all my workings because we've got time. Finding these maths papers, they give you time so that you can actually do these sums properly, so you're not making mistakes and you're not rushing and panicking. And there we go. So x plus 5 squared plus 10, and that's the finished result. Make sure your brackets, make sure your square goes outside your brackets, and just double check, have I answered everything? Am I happy? All my numbers are correct? Just to check through that's done before. And if you're feeling a little bit savvy, you might want to write A is 5, B is 10. Just again, so you double check. So when you're looking back through your paper at the end, you can do, right, I have got A and B. Now it says hence. Now it's giving you a clue there. You've already completed the square, so you're going to be doing something with that completing the square. It says find the least value of x squared plus 10x plus 35. Well, we know whenever we square something, it becomes a positive number. So if I put x as anything lower than 0, like -1, -2, it's actually going to have a knock-on effect because you're going to be squaring it. So in fact, my x here would need to be -5. Because if my x is -5, -5 plus 5 squared plus 10, well, that's the same as me saying 0 squared, which is just 0, plus 10 is going to give me 10. So my least value here has to be 10. And then it says, what is the value of x when x squared plus 10x plus 35 has its least value? Well, we've already shown that in our working, so it has to be -5. Now, don't put both values in either of these sections, because what it's asking for you, the x value and the least value, it's not asking you to write down everything in one, so separate the two for me. So checking the mark scheme. I wonder if that, no, I've cut through, that's really lovely. So the first one, it shows B1 for the site of x plus 5 squared, plus or minus something. So even if you haven't shown your workings, as long as you've got that 5, you're getting 1 mark. Your second mark then is for your plus 10. So down by here, where I've got my plus 10, I've got my second mark. Okay, and it does also say allow for plus 35 minus 25 if 10 is seen in like a working. So obviously I've shown all my workings there, but it does definitely say here, do not accept -10 equals -10, because there's no equals in this top bit. Whereas if it had an equal sign, that would be different. Next one, okay, so if we look at the mark scheme for this point, it said the least value is plus 10, so I'm just going to rub off that little part by there so I'm not having the workings over it. Okay, so least value is plus 10 or just 10. That's what that means. You don't have to put the plus if you don't want to. Sorry, mind me. Okay, and it's really important that you didn't write 35. So they were just making sure that you did. Sorry, that's me. If you had said x is 0 and 0, and you would have just had 35, so it was just making sure that you used the formula above. That's why they're saying not 35 or -10. And the last one is noting that you're making that bracket 0. So because to make that bracket 0, we had to put -5 in. That's where that comes from. And it's saying there, do not accept the coordinates, because even though your x, it's not a y value that you're getting, so that's why they don't want you to then write it. There we go. Okay, the last question. So this was part C of the question 1, another 4 marks. And it says, solve by completing the square, x squared equals 22x minus 5. It says, do not use a calculator to answer this question. So the reason why they're stating this is because they want to see your work, and so they don't want you just to press equals or use some sort of method that's going to find the answer for you. If there is any mini calculations within it, there is nothing stopping you doing those calculations as long as you're writing down what you're doing. But I tend to try and see if I can just do it all with just workings, just to avoid losing any marks. So first thing I want to do, when I've got my x squared equals 22x minus 5, is get them all over to one side so it equals to 0, because that's going to help us solve it. So x squared minus 22x minus plus 5 equals 0. We're now going to complete the square of this section. So x, and remember we halve that 22, so that gives us 11 squared, and then we're squaring the minus of 11 squared. Always be careful there, because some people see minuses and they think, oh, now I need to add. No, it's always you're taking away your square. And I can do a video on that, just explain why if you ever want to know. That's not a problem. Okay, so we got x minus 11 squared minus 121 plus 5. So this is something that if you want to do quick and make sure you're not making any mistakes, you might just do it in your calculator. I wouldn't mind if you did, because it's just making sure you're not making any errors. Okay, so that should give you 116, and that equals 0. So now we're on the stage of solving. So to solve this then, we're moving everything over so that x is left on its own. Okay, so we got x minus 11 squared, and we're going to chuck that 116, so we're going to add it on to both sides. So hence it disappears from one and it appears on the other. Now, to get rid of the square, we're going to square roots. Be mindful of when you square root something, it does give you a positive or a negative value, because 2 negatives make a positive, so therefore it could have been a negative number on the front. So just remind yourself of that, because again, that's where a lot of people lose marks. So what I tend to do is just put my plus or minus there so I remember for myself. And then to get x on its own, x equals 11, and I'm going to put it this side just because then I can remember my plus and minus is there. If you did want to put it on the other side, that is fine too. Right, so that question's pretty much finished off. The only thing I would do is double check your surd, because it says leave your answer in surd form. They are controlling on the surd a little bit more than possible, so I just check to make sure, can the surd be simplified, especially because it's 116. It's one of those ones that I know goes into 4. So if we think 116 divided by 4, well, we've got 25 plus 4 there, so that's 29. So that gives us 2 root 29. Now, it doesn't always double check, but because it said about surd form, I feel like you need to simplify it into a smaller surd. So just look out for those words. Wow, that 2 is awful. Let me rewrite that for you. 29, there we go. Okay, and that's questions done. So if we now look at the mark scheme on this, of course, the mark scheme has gone down to the bottom. If I just write those last few lines up here. 1, 6 equals 1, 1 plus or minus 2 root 29. And we know that was because root 16 went to 4 and root 29, giving us 2 root 29. There we go. I can rub off some of these though, so there we go. Rub those last bits off. It should be fine now. This is slightly better. Slightly, she says. It's one of the things when you're trying to do this. This is my first video, so it can only get better, as I say. There we go. Right, so where do we get the marks? So the first mark we got is completing the square. So they didn't rearrange. Oh, they have rearranged on this one. So as long as it's shown, I divided 22 by 2. I didn't leave it there because I thought that's disgusting, but they obviously gave you marks if you just halved it and left it in its formula. And then, so that was your first mark. So we've got that straight away. And 22 minus 9, which gives you 1. So that's your second mark by here. Okay, so that's your M1 by there. And you also had an M1 by here. Okay, so that's 2 marks before you even answered the question, which is quite nice. Now, your next 2 marks is for getting the final answer. So they were happy with 2 marks for this part by here. Oh, there we go. And that was your A2. If you didn't show your plus and minus, so just be aware, if you just showed a plus or a minus, you lost the mark. So this gained 1 mark of that. So I'll say worth 1 mark. And there you go. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Obviously, it's just a quick video on question 1, going through everything that we need to. It is my first one of these. Obviously, pause, like, do whatever you need to on these videos. Watch them as many times as you like. I will be going through the whole of paper, well, this additional paper, and I'll be going through the others as well and put them all as a series, just so you've got them for revision or whatever you might need them for. Anyways, well done, and I hope you enjoyed.